We're speaking next with Pat Patel. He is the Executive Director of Elevandi, which is a nonprofit entity set up by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. We're talking about the Singapore Fintech Festival, SFF for short, which is one of the world's largest fintech festivals coming up, the major themes of the festival, and what exactly in the world needs to be changed today. Pat, some big themes we'll be discussing today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on here. It's been a crazy story for you guys, certainly, in terms of your growth.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks to interesting guests and smart people like yourself making the program very interesting. Tell us about some of the key themes of SFF this year, and we'll break it down. I believe there are 3 or 4 major themes of the festival.
Yeah. So the overarching piece is around the intersection of policy, finance, and tech, because we firmly believe that if we want to advance financial services, but also the fintech startups, you kind of need those 3 communities coming together. And that's what's quite different about the festival. People say it's an event, but there are so many events around the world. This is more than an event. It's more of a movement because you have the ability to affect the future of financial services. And so the 4 kind of key thematics that we'll be covering, the first one is re-architecting the financial system, which is quite a big topic, as you can imagine. There are so many inequalities in the financial system as it stands. If you think there are about 1.4 billion that are unbanked, there are countless others that are underbanked because the current financial provision isn't quite right for their needs. And so there is a strong desire around the world to basically address those inequalities. And those can, arise from basic bank accounts all the way through to payment transactions. And so, in some jurisdictions, we're quite spoiled that transactions, just to even send a payment to say for me to you, is at a reasonable price. But in other places, it's extremely expensive. And certainly when you go across borders and, in some markets, it takes 2 or 3 days to send one payment to another bank. And that is absolutely insane. And so re-architecting the whole finance system is all around how do we come together as a community, that policy kind of nexus of finance and technology, in particular the technology piece, because if we leverage technologies that are available to us, such as stable coins, but also CBDCs that are slowly, so central bank digital currencies that are slowly becoming quite pervasive, and we're waiting for the actual implementation of these in certain jurisdictions, that will start to bring back that cost to serve, but also the ability to reach the masses. Because no longer do we need to rely on physical kind of interactions and physical branches. We can do these things far cheaper than what we've done before. And so that is one of the key thematics. And so by bringing together policymakers from different jurisdictions, they'll be talking quite heavily about the projects that are going on. We have the IMF coming along as well, and they'll be quite effective in this dialogue, as well as the World Bank. So as you know, Ajay Banga has just taken over as the president of the World Bank. So he was the former CEO of MasterCard. He now has an extremely huge job. And so he's coming to the festival to talk about some of the projects and to talk about that inequality, as well as a little bit around sustainability. And so that's one of the front and center themes. The next one is all about the risks. And, I'm sure you've covered this throughout the year. There are so many risks in the world today. And it's a very sad place in the sense of we have technological risks. So risks that we're seeing from the digital asset space and high profile kind of incidents that happened at the end of last year and obviously this year. We're seeing kind of those financial risks. No one would have thought that an organization such as Credit Suisse would have had the challenges it did do at the beginning of this year. And then we have kind of the whole economic risk, where we have different economic indicators that have led to a real fundamental shift in financial services. In particular, the major impact has been the VC marketplace and fintechs is heavily pronounced there. And then we have climate risks. And so we're going to be covering a lot of these risks and really kind of trying to come together to think about how do we overcome these risks. One of the things that we've been studying for some time, which is not exactly a sexy topic, is a concept of risk frameworks that organizations have. And a lot of organizations, sadly, have risk management tools and frameworks that were fit for purpose yesterday and the day before yesterday, but certainly not fit for purpose today, and definitely not fit for purpose tomorrow. And so we're going to be talking about some of those kind of elephant in the room topics, and how do we overcome them? Because it's all well and good talking about it, but how do we as a community, from different vantage points, whether you're a policy side, whether you're finance, whether you're technology, how do you kind of come together to solve these? The third area is something that's close to my heart, is around kind of talent and entrepreneurship, because if you think during COVID and post-COVID, it's been the whole community of the next wave of students or graduates. It's also entrepreneurship that has really taken a bit of a hit since the challenges of COVID. Certainly SMEs have. And so we're supporting this community through a number of programs. One is we have an investor office hours where we're bringing like hundreds of investors together with founders to try and see if there are opportunities to kind of collaborate, ideally kind of funding. We have a number of stages where founders will come on and talk about some of those inspirational yet pivotal moments that have got them to where they are today. And then we'll also have kind of talent development initiatives where we're working with universities, framing the future of work, but also how can you upskill and reskill and kind of future proof your career, and that's super important. And within this kind of thematic, we're very fortunate to announce that we're working with Media Corp in Singapore, and an association out of Silicon Valley called TIE, which is the Indian Entrepreneurship Association. And so we're launching a TV show that will represent Southeast Asia. It's kind of like if it were a Dragon's Den Shark Tank format for Southeast Asia, to shine a spotlight on entrepreneurship and try and kind of get some of the founders' stories to a prime time level. And so that will start airing at the festival. Actually, start airing. It will start filming at the festival. It will run all the way to the end of the year, and then it will air on CNA TV show. Will be around about February time. And so that's kind of something we're really stoked about. And as Elevandi is a non-profit, we're kind of wired a little bit differently. Our motivations and intentions are literally impact related. And so just the last thing, I know you're desperate to kind of chime in on this, is the last kind of topic area is around AI, because you can't go anywhere in the world today without hearing the word AI or chat GPT or generative AI. But if you think about where we've come in the last year in particular, that you had this massive kind of boom and hype at the end of last year. And then as the year has worn on, there's been a lot of warning signs, so-called hallucinations using ChatGPT in particular. And so what we're looking to frame is that dialogue that needs to happen. Should AI be regulated? There are some that say it should be. Others are saying, well, we should let this technology evolve. And so there will be a lot of discussions around frameworks, rather than being quite prescriptive, because if you regulate a particular technology, clearly that goes against the grain of innovation. And so it's trying to find that happy balance. And so there will be a lot of dialogues behind closed doors as well as on stage to really start to kind of frame how we move forward with AI in terms of the workplace, but also in terms of the applications of AI that we can use in businesses that are practical, and AI for good, as it were, which sounds quite cliched, but I think it's quite an apt topic in today's world at the moment. So a long answer to your question. Interested to hear your thoughts.
Yes. So I'd like to drill down a little bit deeper on the first aspect, which is the re-architecting the monetary system theme. You have leaders of finance attending the conference. You've got the president of Singapore, the president of the Philippines, the president of the World Bank, managing director of the IMF, like you mentioned, the governor of the Central Bank of Malaysia, the deputy governor of the Central Bank, the Bank of Italy, rather. And so what are these leaders looking to fix in terms of the higher problems of the monetary system today? In other words, after the event, what do you expect to happen in terms of coming to a consensus of what the new monetary system could look like from the world leaders of finance?
Yeah, it's a good question. And a lot of the conversations are going to happen because if you think about these leaders, they're not coming just to speak on stage. They're coming to have these dialogues, one-to-one meetings in roundtable sessions that we're running throughout the festival. And so the big thing here is coming to an alignment, because you can't do this alone. And so all of these leaders are coming to have dialogues with counterparts, to have dialogues with other industry stakeholders, so we can start to kind of, one, get an alignment, two, start to work through a series of projects that can start to address this inequality. And it will start with the pricing element, so what technologies we can use to start to reduce the cost to serve, but also start to think about that speed and transparency of services. And a lot of it revolves around payments, because payments is probably one of the biggest verticals in financial services, and certainly is in fintech. But that is probably one of the key bits to serve and try and work through. And so what we see is a number of conversations that will talk about different bridges between different jurisdictions, how we can start to really reduce that price point, but the service that's offered on top of that. And then there'll be quite a few conversations around something we refer to as digital public goods, or digital public infrastructure. And the best implementation of this is probably in India. Singapore has its own variant. And what this is it's the fundamentals of any digital economy, and it's referred to as a stack. And so you need, for this stack, you need the base layer of a digital identity system. In India, they have around 1 billion people that are biometrically enabled on this database. On top of that, you have an interoperability of payments. So different payment systems that are real time, but can connect to that identity system. The third layer on this is around the data exchange, whether it's financial or non-financial, but it's how that information can flow around seamlessly, linked to the payment system, linked to your identity. And then the last layer, which is probably the most problematic, is authorization, because you need that consent architecture framework that allows people to have some ownership of their data and choose where they want to share that. So when you have those four kind of stacks coming together, digital infrastructure, you really have the fundamentals of a digital economy. And what that really does is bring down all of the cost points, the price points, because these should be public utilities. And in countries such as, around Europe and clearly the US as well, and in Canada, you may not necessarily have a fully functioning digital enabled backbone, which should be the foundation of any economy. And so there'll be a lot of discussions around, how do countries start to form this foundation? How can you really start to bring this together? Because once you have this stack in place, you can dramatically reduce that cost to serve that I've been speaking about for the last few minutes or so.
Okay. And finally, let's talk about AI. So the major new developments in AI and the real world applications that you mentioned. Can you drill down on some specifics? What can we expect to learn from this conference in terms of new applications of AI in the fintech space?
Yeah, so I think, it's you can't go anywhere without the words generative AI being mentioned, and so there is the alignment again. I use that word quite heavily here, but it's the alignment around how can we use generative AI in the workplace, because clearly it can solve a number of pinch points that we're seeing. And a great example of this is there is clearly a talent shortage in large parts of the world, in particular tech talent. And so what we're seeing is a lot of developers beginning to use ChatGPT in a way that reduces the time to deliver a particular piece of code or a project. And so what that enables then is tech talent to be able to deliver more in a calendar year. And so we're seeing a lot of freelancers coming in, working on multiple projects, leveraging kind of generative AI, ChatGPT, to reduce some of the mundane parts of coding and the work that goes on to develop projects on the software side. And so what that means is then that can really address some of the talent shortages, because the existing tech talent can work on more projects. So that's kind of one avenue we're seeing. But when we kind of look at the financial services, you can kind of break it down into two areas: leveraging kind of artificial intelligence and data, big data, as it were, machine learning, to basically address some of the inefficiencies within an organization. And so in the back office of financial services organizations, you can really start to reduce the cost and time it takes to deliver certain activities. You can also get a better framing of customer needs, leveraging different data sets and leveraging, different types of technologies, you can start to have a better idea of your customers, because you're taking it from different systems. You're leveraging a better way to understand different behaviors. And so that means you can provide products and services that are more in tune for what the customers need. And then on the front end, it's that personalization that we're beginning to see, and we're seeing it in the wealth tech space, but we're also seeing it in financial services, so account provision as well. And so that's the two areas that we see in particular, the back office and the personalization of services. And obviously in the US, I believe US and Canada is quite well advanced here. Clearly in parts of Asia, if you look at the whole concept of the super apps, and you have these giants from China, but you also have a number from Southeast Asia that are leveraging kind of elements of AI in their super apps, which gives a better customer service in terms of the different provisions. Because if you think the whole concept of a super app is blending a variety of services to the end customer, so whether it's your financial services life or your retail life, even your social commerce life or your social kind of messaging life, you can bring those together. And you see that quite heavily with what Tencent's been doing over the last few years.
Excellent. Pat, where can we learn more about the SFF?
Yeah, so we've got our website. Just search for Singapore Fintech Festival, and you'll be able to kind of get more information there. It's 1,000 speakers. We're going to hit to about 60,000 attendees or more. That's where we're kind of targeting at the moment. And then there'll be about 10,000 companies from across the world, from the rising stars to the established giants. So yeah, miss it at your peril.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today, Pat. Best of luck with the conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Great to be on the show.
And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and learn more about the SFF in the link down below.